I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you to Sherry for inviting me to speak on two different topics today. I'm going to talk about theory of mind and also working with students who are deaf or hard of hearing with disabilities, and that'll be the afternoon session. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am part of the outreach team for the Illinois School for the Deaf, and we provide in-services for deaf and hard of hearing teachers, special ed teachers, general ed teachers, sign language interpreters, parents, and other support staffs, speech and language, audiologists, and it's a variety of topics regarding children who are deaf and hard of hearing, birth through age 21. So if you're interested, check us out on the ISD website, and you can get more information about the free topics that we provide. I just want to kind of get an idea about who's here in my audience today. How many folks are teachers of deaf and hard of hearing students? Okay. How about interpreters, paraprofessionals, social workers, other people? Okay. And a classroom. How many folks work in a classroom situation? How about a hearing itinerant situation? Okay, so we have a nice variety of folks here today. And I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I was a coordinator of deaf and hard of hearing services for NIA, Northwestern Illinois Association, and I oversaw the NIA Deaf program, different district services, cooperative services, our audiological clinics, hearing itinerant services, interpreters. And then I was there for 26 years and went to Kendall County Special Education. And that, at the time, was the fastest growing county in the nation, and their population was greatly increasing, and we greatly expanded their deaf and hard of hearing programming, hearing itinerant services, interpreters, et cetera, and I was there for 9 years. And so if you're doing the math, I was only 12 when I started, and that's why the numbers can work out. But I retired, and about 2 weeks into my retirement, ISD Outreach contacted me and said, well, Linda, you've been retired for a while. How would you like to be on the outreach team and provide educational in-services? And I said I'd be happy to do that, and that's how I'm here with you today. I'm going to be talking about a theory of mind. And I know it sounds kind of boring, but it really isn't. I really like this topic. I think it's interesting, and I think the research behind it is interesting. Things that they did with children to find out more about their concept of theory of mind, and I'm going to do some fun things too. So hang in there with me this morning. But the theory of mind that I'm going to be talking about is going to give you a different perspective on behavior. It's going to be more the behind the scenes aspect of behavior. What might be the thoughts that are involved with the behaviors that you see? Of course, we can't actually magically look in there, but we can use some of this research information to tell us what the child or student might be thinking when those actions are going on. So it's a little bit different than perhaps some other trainings that you've been to. All of the information that I'm going to talk with you about is research-based, and I hope that you'll gain some knowledge and skills about theory of mind, that it will help your students gain in their social skills. That's really the link here, how their theory of mind can impact social skills, but also reading. And I'm going to make that link to reading for you at the end of the presentation. So we're going to mostly talk about what the challenges are for kids who have an immature theory of mind and how to help them develop those skills. We're going to look at the link with social and reading, and also I'd like you to think about sustained learning. If you hear an idea or two that might match with one of your students or something that you could share with a colleague, write that down. And who knows what kind of kids you might be serving in the future. So it might be information to just kind of tuck away as well. Okay, so what is theory of mind? Can you see that little picture up there? What does that look like? What do you see? See, you and me. Can everybody see that? You and me. And that's what theory of mind is. But it's at the end of the presentation. I'll still keep talking. Theory of mind is really being able to think about you and think about me at the same time. Think about our thoughts, think about beliefs, desires, intentions that I have, and what do you have? What are you thinking now? Being able to do that at the same time. And this optical illusion, I'll tell you, it's on the government website. This is not supposed to be funny. The optical illusions are on the government website. So you could get that from the National Institutes of Health to find some optical illusions if you'd like to do that with other individuals as well. But theory of mind helps us interpret or understand what people are saying. It gives us clues to help make sense of their behavior, and it helps us predict what their behaviors might be. It's a set of social skills, social cognition. It develops in early childhood and continues on through adolescence, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. But I wanted to also mention that theory of mind is considered a core deficit of children who are on the autism spectrum disorder. And it is also a delay that we see in some children who are deaf as well. And that's why we're talking about that today, that people may not think the same way that we think, and do the children understand that? So in theory of mind, you may have experienced this. Either you've said these things, and that's okay if you said them, or you know people that said them. What do you think I'm thinking about your behavior? Or how does that make me feel? Or how does that your friend feel? And those are things, and those are strategies really to ask about the other person's perspective. And that is an okay behavior strategy to use. But I'm going to give you some more background information about that, because what if the student is thinking those little red thought bubbles? Well, I'm thinking what you're thinking what I'm thinking. It's the same. You feel the same way I do. Or I don't know, and maybe if they have theory of mind, I don't care. That might be some things that they're thinking. But the kids may not be able to process that question the way that we're hoping that they can. And so I'm going to to give you a little bit more information about that. So kids who have some behavior challenges, what you might see is that they're insensitive to other people's feelings, or they have the inability to take into account what other people know, or have a hard time to negotiate friendship situations, social situations. And if you think about, let's say some boys are outside in the Chicago winter and they're playing outside and one of them slips and falls on the ice. What are those other boys going to do? Probably they're going to be laughing about what just happened. Maybe somebody will reach over and help them stand up. That's probably something typical that you might see. Or if kids are watching like a Wile E. Coyote cartoon and, you know, the coyote falls off the building and becomes flat and falls, you know, he's able to stand right back up. And people might find that funny. But what if it was an old lady? What if it was an old lady that fell on the ice? And there's that deaf boy, and he's laughing. And people have gathered around that old lady that slipped and fell on the ice, and that deaf boy can't see or hear what's going on, what are the people saying to that old lady that fell on the ice. And you can think about, what would you be saying to her? Are you okay? Are you hurt? Can you stand up? Do you want me to help you? Should we call an ambulance? People that are gathered around that lady are concerned, but the deaf boy doesn't hear it and doesn't know that in that situation, it calls for a different kind of response. And perhaps someone needs to be able to explain that information to the deaf boy that may not really have ever thought about that situation, that it's an old lady that's having that difficulty. Or how about a friendship situation? I saw this example, I'll kind of paraphrase, it was in Development of Social Understanding in Children with Hearing Loss, Implications for Audiologists by Muller and Schick. And in their writing, they talked about two boys having a conversation. And you can imagine if this was some sort of phone conversation or text conversation. But one boy, I'll just call him Paul, says to the other boy, I just got a new game. You want to come over and play? And the other boy says, I got to finish my homework, but I could come in an hour, okay? And Paul says, don't worry about your homework. You may know Paul. And he says, you could just finish it later. And the friend says, well, you know, my mom will ground me if I don't do my homework. I'll just hurry up and come over. And Paul says, well, bring your homework here. And so the friend says, you know, that's a good idea because I can't figure out one math problem. Can you help me with the one math problem? And Paul says, oh, you can just copy mine. And the friend says, well, it's a test and I'm not going to know it. Could you just help me? And Paul says, you're still going to understand, and there'll be a review sheet. And the friend says, but I just need help with one problem, and then we could play your new game. And Paul says, all right, you waste my time, just come over. So maybe the friend has a little more theory of mind, thinking about how he can meet both of their needs, his own needs and the needs of Paul to play the game. But Paul is really not exhibiting those kinds of behaviors. In that social situation, he is really more caring about his own needs and wants. And that's just just one example of where kids might have some challenges with social interaction if they have a less mature theory of mind. Another possible behavior that you might see in kids with theory of mind, and we'll just abbreviate it TOM, theory of mind challenges, is the inability to read somebody else's interests. Do you ever have a kid that just goes on and on and tells you the same thing, and and it's like people's eyes are glazing over, and we've heard this story before. Or unable to detect the speaker's meaning. I know what you said, but really, what did you mean by that? And the inability to understand that there could just be misunderstandings. Like if you think about, imagine a pool and a boy with who's deaf or hard of hearing is going to the pool with all of his pool stuff on the way to the locker room, and he's got his bag, and he sees somebody in the pool raising their hand, coming out of the water like that and going back under. And so the boy thinks, must need some soap. Let me see if I have some soap in here. Well, that's misreading the situation because, maybe the kid was really drowning and not thinking about taking a bath at that time. But it's being able to detect the cues and clues from the situation to put that together of what might be the other person's needs. And another thing you might see is having a hard time being able to understand or to understand a deception or to think about being fooled. Like an April Fool's joke. Can they understand that in that situation you can say something and it's not really true and it's supposed to be funny and we only do this once a year? Are they able to understand that deception? Can they understand why other people acted that way? And what about the unwritten rules for them? Do they have insight into what really you're supposed to do now that you're in middle school or junior high? Then we don't really do that anymore, but it's not like a whole list of things that they do give you a list of rules, but not the unwritten rules, the insider things that you probably need to think about. Not letting other people see you cry or whatever it might be. That's a big thing for middle school kids. And they might perceive teasing as lying, like that April Fool's example. I know one time a friend of ours, her daughter asked her mom, I know this is on camera, but she asked, is there Santa Claus? I don't know who's watching out there, but asked, is there really a Santa Claus? And her mom kind of figured that she knew and said, no, honey, there's no Santa. And the little girl went, wah, and cried, because it's that feeling of being deceived, but the mom could perceive that it might be a hard thing for her. And something maybe you've seen on TV in a commercial, and this woman might put on a new dress and say to her husband, does this make me look fat? And then we wait for it. And what we're waiting for is theory of mind. Is the husband going to say, well, just a little bit in your stomach area? Or should should the husband say, "Oh, you look beautiful. That's a beautiful dress you have," and something that, you know, is going to meet her needs and desires at that time because she already bought the dress, and looked happy wearing it. So those are some things that you maybe kind of see, and in your head you know, and now you have a little name for it of theory of mind. Is the one person able to perceive the feelings, desires, intentions of the other person? And another component of theory of mind is that they may, if you have a less mature theory of mind, you might not really understand how your behavior impacts somebody else, or how your expressions impact how someone else is feeling about what's going on. And it really depends on the development of the student if they understand these things, but we just expect them to do. And that's like a given when we're working with them on their behavior challenges. And I know the ISRC is also working with kids with vision loss, so I'm going to throw a few vision things in there for you too. But kids who are have vision loss may not realize that their mannerisms or actions are really conveying information to someone else because they're not seeing that body language. They're not understanding that what they're doing may have an impact on how someone else is thinking or feeling. And so they would need someone to kind of step in and help explain that to the student that has a vision loss. Also, there's the thought about joint attention, that joint attention is kind of like a social way of communicating that we even see little babies do, that at 12 months, 14 months, that maybe the baby might point to something and hoping that the adult will also look up at what it is and describe that. Oh, that's the fan, and the fan is going now. And at 16 months, they may look up at the fan and then look back at mom, and up at the fan and back at mom, kind of creating a triangle there. And that's what these construction workers are doing. They're looking at the blueprints, but the one guy is suddenly looking over there like, is this the right building, or is this going to work? And so the other guy, his gaze is also traveling there. So it's a social interaction. And this is another deficit in children who have autism spectrum disorder. And that is also part of theory of mind, being able to think about getting that other person to share the same thought with you. Okay, now I'm going to tell you some stories about theory of mind and the research that they did. And I think it's really interesting. It's about false belief, having a false understanding of something. And this is another characteristic of children who have autism spectrum disorder, but it is also something that, you know, perhaps they might develop at a much slower pace, or depending on that individual child, and other needs might continue to be a challenge for them. Many children who are typically developing, this is also a skill that develops. It is not something that they have, and perhaps we haven't really thought about this before, but is an area of delay for children who are deaf or hard of hearing. And this was in Theory of Mind, Language and Cognition in Deaf Children by Brenda Schick, DeVries, Jill and Peter DeVries, and Bob Hofmeister. and they tell the story, a cupboard story. And it's about Simon. And Simon and his dad bake a cake. And they finish baking the cake, and they put it in the cupboard. Do you guys know this story? Okay. And he put the cake in the cupboard, and then Simon decides he wants to eat it later, and he's going to go outside and play. Dad thinks about the cake, and maybe it needs to be refrigerated. So Dad puts it in the refrigerator while the boy is outside playing. And then the boy comes back in. Where's the boy going to look? I forgot to mention, I also have a hearing loss and wear hearing aids, so maybe speak up. Okay, where's the boy gonna look? Cupboard. Okay, you guys have it. So you have theory of mind to think that what you know is different than what the boy knows. But if you ask this of a young child, a 3-year-old to maybe 5, 6, that they're going to say that it's in the refrigerator because they know it's in the refrigerator, and they're not separating what they know from what somebody else knows. And kids are aware that other people have thoughts and feelings, but maybe they don't realize that they're different from what they have. And so this is like a classic story about false belief, being able to recognize that someone else has a false belief. So what they need in order to develop this is to know that, people can have different wants, different desires. Like I might want a taco and my friend wants a burger, and that's okay. But sometimes, do you ever have friends that tell you that you should really want what they want? That you should like what they like and can't really understand why you do or do not like something. But, okay, I digress. So you need to have that understanding that people have different desires. Then comes the understanding of false belief. And then after that, being able to judge how that person might feel in the situation. How was that boy going to feel when he looks in the cabinet and it's not in there anymore? But what happened to the cake? How's he going to feel about it? And there were interesting, what they have is like where they might put a box of candy, or it looks like a box of candy, and inside are really rocks. So how is that child going to feel when they open it up and find something that they're not expecting in that box of candy? So there were they did an official study, those same authors, Language and Theory of Mind, a study of deaf children. There's growing research, and I think it's really interesting about the stories that they come up to look at children's theory of mind. And I'll share those with you because maybe you might try some of those out on some people kids or adults. And they looked at the location change, like what we just talked about, the cupboard story and the box of rocks candy kind of idea. They did something with hidden stickers, which is like seeing is knowing. And they had kids, they had 2 adults giving kids advice of where to look for something, and the one person could see and tell them where to look, and the other person was blindfolded. And did the child understand that seeing is knowing, that they should look towards the person that can see the information to give them advice of where to look? Another one was like a surprise face kind of thing, like putting a transparency over the face. Would the person be surprised or not? Like the cupboard story, are they surprised if they find something, or that something was switched? And another one they considered memory for compliment clauses, like thought that, felt that. And in that, it's about a little girl, and she sees a shape in the hair of the boy, and she thinks it's a leaf, and does she tell him it's a leaf, or she thinks it's a bug, but she knows it's a leaf and tells him he has a bug in his hair, and it's the idea of if she sees a bug and says it's a leaf, you know, is she giving him correct information? Is that something that that's just not clearly conveyed? That they looked at all of this information, and what do you think about the findings? What do you think that they would find about ASL versus oral? Any thoughts? Which might have done better? Okay, ASL kids did better than oral. And deaf kids of hearing families were more delayed than hearing kids of hearing families, or deaf kids of deaf families. And if the language part was set aside and not important, they still found that deaf children of deaf families still had challenges with false belief and that knowledge piece about seeing and knowing. But it's not just language that's a factor that impacts kids who are deaf or hard of hearing. There's some other things that impact theory of mind, and I'll share those with you in a bit. But I wanted to show you this quick, and I should put the sound on, video about this little girl, Maria, and she knows, she's a friendly, happy child, and she knows 2 languages. At the time of the video, she was not yet in kindergarten. She is hearing, and she can spell and write short CVC words. So it gives you a little background about her knowledge. And she had recently turned 5, I think. So I'm going to play that. I hope that you could hear it. But it's actually me telling her a version of the cake story. Okay, and that was short. Let's try again. Okay. There we go.
Ready for the story about the birthday?
Oh.
There was a dad and a little girl, and they made a birthday cake for mine.
Okay, can't hear it, yeah.
And Mommy wasn't home.
All right.
So they thought that you put the cake away.
This is,
And they put the cake in the kitchen cabinet.
sorry.
You know? They put it away, and then the little girl.
They put the cake in the kitchen cabinet, and the little girl went out to play.
I wonder if the cake should really be in the refrigerator. So put the cake in the refrigerator.
So they put the cake in the refrigerator,
The little girl was outside.
and the little girl was outside.
The little girl came back inside.
And then the little girl
Went
came
to
back
look for the cake.
inside, and she went to look for the cake.
Where's the little girl gonna look for the cake?
Where's the little girl going to look for the cake?
Okay, why?
In the refrigerator. Why? Because it's in the refrigerator. So she did what kids who have a theory of mind still in development would do, is to say what she knows. And about a week later, I thought perhaps I could use this as a teaching time to look at theory of mind. So what do you think I did when and I don't have a video, I'll tell you what happened. Well, what do you think I did to kind of try to talk with her about her answer with theory of mind? What might you do in that situation? If you thought developmentally the child was ready to take the next step, what might you ask? Okay, where was the cake? Emphasizing the boy went out to play, where was the cake? Any other thoughts?
And then also, when the parent moved the cake, where was the child?
Okay, and then review when the parent moved the cake, where was the child? And I did talk with the little girl about a week later and did exactly those things. I said, "You want to hear another birthday cake story?" And she said, "Okay." And I was thinking, well, maybe she identified too much with being the little girl and helping to make the cake. So I changed the story to a little boy, and I made the little boy go out to play baseball. And was trying to emphasize, about where the cake was and who was where, and asked the question, and she told me, in the refrigerator. And this is the same story, she said. And I said, well, in this story, the little boy went outside and he couldn't see his dad. And what did his dad do? His dad moved the cake to the refrigerator. But where was the boy? And she said, outside playing baseball. So the boy was outside playing baseball. Where will he look for the cake when he comes back in? And you could see the wheels kind of spinning. And she said, in the kitchen cabinet. And I said, and you're right. So this story is a little different because this time you told me that the little boy will look in the kitchen cabinet. So it's a little bit different than what you told me last time. And you could see those wheels just spinning and spinning and spinning, and she's looking off, and then she says, I have a ball. And so that was like, that's the end of the cake story. We're not looking at this anymore. But so she was developmentally ready to move on to those next steps to be able to talk about it. But I thought perhaps she might just say those things because of her linguistic capabilities and that she was quite verbal. So this does happen developmentally with children, and she was just ready to be able to go on. There was then some more studies done with the deaf children by Tucci, Easterbrooks, and Letterberg, and they looked at the effects of training for false belief on deaf and hard of hearing preschool and kindergarten kids. And they looked at what they called diverse wants, like they had like another character or a doll would say the opposite. So if they said, what would you like? Would you like a cookie or carrot? And if the child chose cookie, then the character chose the opposite. And then the question posed was, what does that character want to eat? And it's trying to see if the child can inhibit their own wants and needs as an answer and answer what the other person is really thinking. And so with kids with kind of behavior challenges or social challenges, are they able to inhibit their wants and needs and think about what somebody else wants and needs? Or are they still thinking, well, they want what I want, they think what I think? They also did, although in the example, it's a blue cup, but you can see it's a different color cup than the other one. So they took the blue cup as a pretend thing, and pretending is a kind of a step to developing theory of mind, and they pretended that they painted it green. And then they had another person walk in that didn't see the painting and ask, what are they going to say? What color is the cup? That we pretended to paint it and we know that it's blue, but what is that person going to say? And again, that's a little insight into theory of mind for what the child might be thinking. And then they did like unexpected contents of a box and things like that. And what they found was that training did help the kids move on in the different stages of theory of mind, but it wasn't uniformly generalized. And sometimes what they do to help, they look at providing like little thought bubbles that could be, put on a character or a doll, or the other person can show their thoughts, to show as a way of teaching that something might be different. So I think it's really interesting to look at what the research is showing us. And I'll share with you one more research thing, and this was on a TED Talk from Rebecca Sachs, and she's a cognitive neuroscientist at MIT. She's a professor there, and she did some studies to look at what is your brain doing when you're thinking about other people's thoughts and beliefs. And she used a functional MRI to see what part of the brain was activated. And there's a part kind of like in back and up from your ear, the right temporal parietal junction, if you're looking for it. And that gets activated when you're thinking or reasoning or about somebody else's state of mind, their motives, their feelings. And so her story was about a pirate named Josh, which I think a lot of pirates are named Josh these days. And Josh loved cheese sandwiches. And so Josh had a cheese sandwich and he put it on the treasure chest. And then he thought, I'm paraphrasing the story, but I'm thirsty, I'm gonna go get something to drink. So Josh goes off and gets something to drink. And another pirate, Ivan, comes by. But before Ivan comes by, the wind blows the cheese sandwich off of the treasure chest. And it's on the ground in the dirt. So Ivan comes by and he's thinking, I'm gonna put my cheese sandwich down and get something to drink. So he puts it on the treasure chest. And when the first pirate comes back, which sandwich is he going to eat? The one on the treasure chest, because Ivan thinks that's his, because that's where he last saw the treasure chest. But we know that Ivan's sandwich is really someplace else. And a 5-year-old would guess right that that's where Ivan would look on the treasure chest. But they would think Ivan should be in trouble for taking it. And so do you ever have kids like that where you know that it was just an innocent mistake, but they think that the other person should be punished or should be in trouble for that? And a 7-year-old would say, well, Ivan shouldn't be punished, but the wind should be punished for knocking it down. They're looking for someone that should have some consequence for doing something. And you may know people that feel it's always important to give a consequence to kids for doing something, but it could be truly a misunderstanding here. And the 3-year-old would say, that Ivan would take the cheese sandwich that's on the ground because the 3-year-old knows that information and doesn't separate what they know from what the first pirate knows. And then they showed the 3-year-old what really happened and which sandwich did he take. And so the 3-year-old's answer wasn't, well, now that I reflect and use my theory of mind, I realize that he has different thoughts than I do and is experiencing a false belief. And you guys know that's not what the 3-year-old thought. He just said, well, he didn't take it because it's dirty, and gave, another reason, something that he might say. And the studies continue to show that the brain continues to develop in theory of mind, like through adolescence. And if you want to know more about this, you can Google Rebecca Sachs and look at the story that she tells about whether or not we think somebody is guilty. Like if they put, poison in somebody's cup, are they guilty? But what if that poison was really labeled sugar? And how do people think about that? Are they still guilty? So this is just something I'm presenting to you to give some thoughts about what also might be going through kids' heads when they're thinking something is not fair, or the other person was mean, or the other person is guilty and should have a consequence to what's happening. And maybe now just, how it's set up, if you want to just talk with your table mates or a spin and turn so you have somebody to talk to, but talk about if you ever had a situation like this where you were trying to explain false belief to a child and they just didn't understand, or they thought the other person was mean or guilty. So it'll be a little tabletop chat for just 2 minutes here. And if you could spin around and find a person that don't leave anybody out, and because they'll be sad, and we need to use theory of mind to think about how they're going to feel if nobody is picking them to talk. Okay. It just sounds like from the chatter that you've all experienced something like this. And I hope that I'm just giving you a little behind the scenes knowledge of what might go into the thinking skills of that child that you're trying to explain the situation to. And it's good to have that explanation in the moment, but it's good to also take a couple steps back and offer some training and practice in some other learning opportunities before there's an unfortunate situation that you're dealing with. So if we're looking at theory of mind, we might say that they have difficulty explaining or predicting the behaviors or emotional states of perhaps themselves if they have additional disabilities or another adult or a child. And they have difficulty understanding somebody else's perspective on things. It's a technique that we use with behavior, but they may have a challenge with this if there's a less mature theory of mind. And they don't understand how their actions actually impact other people. They just did it because they want to do it, and they don't realize how it might be hurtful or surprising to someone else when that happens. So I have a little activity here, and I need a volunteer from the audience. All you have to know is your colors, like red and blue, and yellow and pink and orange and not be colorblind so that you really can say the color. So do I have anyone who would like to be a brave volunteer? Okay, step right up. All you're going to have to do is say a color, and then we'll applaud you. Okay, ready? You just step behind me so you can take a look and see. And could you tell me what color do you see?
Yellow.
Yellow. She sees yellow. Isn't that great? Ah, all right. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to show you what she saw. Do you see yellow? Do you see yellow?
Yes.
Okay, what do you see? Blue. Blue. You see blue, but she sees yellow. Would you like to step around and take a look at this? What do you see?
Blue.
Blue. Now you see things from their perspective. Their perspective was blue and your perspective was yellow. And that's okay. We could have different perspectives or different views. So thank you very much. You did an excellent job. And this is perhaps something you can do to start to introduce perspective taking. And this comes from a curriculum, Bright Start curriculum, that was developed by Burns, Haywood, and Brooks. And they looked at different thinking strategies like perspective taking and used this example as one way to teach that. And we use this example with preschool deaf and hard of hearing children to learn about perspective. Another activity that we did that also came from that curriculum was if you had a box and the kids could, some kids on each side of the box, and they could say, I see yellow, and the teacher asks, what's your perspective? And they could say, I see blue, red, or green, and then they would rotate to see that if they could have a different point of view and they could have a different answer to the same situation. And we say that that's okay. You have a different perspective. Maybe sometimes we drop in opinion, but we always want them to know that that's okay. And sometimes people see the same thing in a different way. And this was done with very little kids, but you can still do this activity with, you could do it with adults that work with you guys. You can do it with older kids too, as a way to start to introduce different perspectives before it's a behavior challenge situation where that's not really a learning opportunity to do this kind of task. But it's another behind the scenes way to take a look at that. And I have another activity that I'd like you to do, and please, I would like everybody to have an opportunity to participate as well, and to not do this as an individual activity, but to do this as a shared group activity. And I have some optical illusions that I'd like you to take a look at, and there's a few of them. So to work through that, and again, they're on the U.S. government website, on the National Institutes of Health for Kids, and take a look at that, and then we'll talk about what's going on when you're looking at that information. So if you guys could kind of get into like your little groups, if you want to do the same group, if you want to join a different group, but if we could just make sure that everybody's okay, and I can give 1 or 2 copies depending on how big your group is so everybody can play. Okay? All righty. I just wanted to have a little discussion with you before we took a little 14, 15-minute break, I think it is. But what did you think about that activity? Could everybody see everything? No. What did you do when the people in your group couldn't see it? What did you do? You had someone that just no matter what you said, they couldn't see it? What kinds of things did you say?
Try looking at it from this angle.
Okay.
Or here's where the nose is, or...
So you gave suggestions of what worked for you, but the person still did not see that information. How about other groups? What did you do? Did you try to help that person? Okay, good. I'm glad you tried to help them. Any things that you did besides give some more information to the person?
Like pointed it out or tried to almost trace it on the picture.
Okay, so you showed it, you like modeled where it was and then gave them that information so they could see it and then helped explain it. Okay, so we had kind of modeling of how people saw it. You showed them the answer and explained it, traced it. Any other things that people did? But this was an exercise that shows that people can look at the same thing but see them differently. And what I think I heard people do, and also what I did, was ask if they wanted a clue. Did they want some more information about where to look to help, like narrow the task in with them? Or sometimes you might just say what it is and they still need to have an opportunity to try that technique, like with the magic eye kind of technique, to hold it close and slowly move it away. There were different ways you can do it, through modeling, through discussion, through extra explanation, and that's what we would do with kids. We would have discussions, we would model, we would give extra explanations to help give them that opportunity to see something from a different perspective. Now, I know that sometimes I can't get them all, and I have to think about them. I try not to look ahead. So it's like a brand new experience for me each time. And I don't know how many F's you found. How many F's did you guys find? 12. I think that's the right answer. I think that is, but you could, I think there are 12, and maybe you use different techniques to try to figure that out. Was anybody still stuck on something in your group, didn't get one? Yeah. Okay, the one where it's like the saxophone man, and the saxophone man is the darker shading. And if you stare at the whiter part, I think you see like a lady. Maybe she reminds me of a lady from the 40s. Yeah. But I don't always see that one. And sometimes it comes and goes. And there were all sorts of different puzzles, because maybe if you're good at one technique, you might not be good at another. Now imagine if you had a little challenge doing it, and all the puzzles were like that, where they were hard for you, and that's what we did for the rest of the day. What would you do? Pardon? What? Yeah, I think it's very hard to see. It's a partial of her face, and she's in the white spot only. And the face part of the man is like her hair. And then the chin of the man is I think part of her eye. Yeah. And then the saxophone coming down is the nose, the side of the nose. But it comes and goes. It comes and goes. Yeah, if from a distance, sometimes that helps, or you turn it a little bit. But what if all of these things that one's a magic eye, put it close, slowly move it away, and it pops into little circles? But here's the question for you, the application of what we're doing today. You guys ready? It's so exciting to play games. We'll give you a chance to talk about it some more in the break that's coming up soon. But what if what I gave you for the rest of the day were the puzzles that were hard for you to solve and you just didn't see it? What would your behavior look like? Would you still participate, like for the next few hours, doing the puzzles that you absolutely can't see, even though people are telling you it's easy, or just look, or here it is, and you can't do it? Are you going to sit quietly, or are you going to maybe take out something else and do it instead? Take out a book, take out your phone, read a newspaper. Are you going to do, and these are some of the activities that we see with our kids that have some challenges in their behavior, that they're feeling that that activity is maybe not fair. They may call that stupid, and they just don't see it. And for some adults, you guys still just didn't see it. So I'd like you to kind of think about that what you need is for somebody to kind of step in the middle and mediate, to give extra explanation and modeling to help them through those challenging tasks. So we'll meet back at 11, and there are bathrooms just down the hall. Thank you, everybody. So theory of mind is kind of like a mind meld of things, being able to think about how we might explain somebody else's behavior and understanding higher level concepts like lying, mistake, false belief, and knowing that other people's thoughts may be real for them, but different than how we see the situation. And empathy is related to that. Can the child relate to the upset feelings of someone else? And an example of theory of mind might be the child where the teacher says, "Oh, that's a nice dress you're wearing," and the student says, "I know." Yeah, you guys know that girl, huh? That's kind of common, and it's not that they're being rude. They actually did a study, and that they showed that there was kind of an order to things, and that the word no is easier than pretend for kids, and pretend is easier than think, and so their go-to is going to be no or don't know, and it may be something developmental or in process there. That was a study from some relationships between children's knowledge of metalinguistic thinking about language and metacognitive thinking about thinking verbs and their linguistic competencies. Some other things that happen is kids might not be able to take into account what other people know, or that may not realize their behavior impacts other people. And because they have limited ways to think of solutions, they may more quickly go to an aggressive solution. That if they have like a more immature theory of mind, they're not able to see things from other ways or think through, if I do this, how's that person going to feel? What's going to happen as a consequence of this? Their go-to method of problem solving might be an aggressive solution. And talking about, the development of theory of mind, that we may have a child that has difficulty to reason and infer things, but it could also be a language-related thing for kids who are deaf or hard of hearing. And this is a true story of a boy who was a fourth grader, and he was deaf, and he was mainstreamed into a general ed reading class. And they were reading a story, I forgot what book it was, but the doggy dies in the book. But it doesn't exactly say that the dog died. It says something like, oh, you know, they're never going to use this bowl again, or whatever, to give inference that the dog had passed on. And they're reading this story in class, and some other kids start to cry. And the deaf boy doesn't understand what's going on. Why are they crying? We're reading. And it's because of the language of the text that didn't allow him to make that inference to then imagine the feelings of others that were in response to that story. But the good news about that boy is that he had excellent hearing itinerant teachers and excellent sign language interpreters, and he went on to college and had a happy life. And I know that because I saw him after. So it's a good story, but it shows that language can be a factor here with kids as well. Let's take a look at developmentally how theory of mind might look in typically developing kids. Like if you have an infant, a newborn, that baby is not thinking, geez, my mom's a new mom, and she's just looking exhausted. I don't think I should cry tonight. I should just let her get a little. That is not going to happen. That little baby does not have theory of mind. They're very much into their own wants and needs. And a 5-year-old can start to maybe distinguish some facial expressions, but may not always know the meaning behind it. Little babies, if they see other kids cry, well, other babies are the same as me, and so we must all be hurt, and we should all cry about something, or we must all be hungry and start to cry. And then you've probably seen like 18-month-old toddlers, and they're toddling along and they tip over. That happens. And the thing about it is, how do other people react to that? You know, does the mom like basically ignore it because they're just going to pop right up and keep going on? Or do they rush over and say, are you know, I mean, they just fell on their padded bottom, and, you know, are you okay? You know, I should hold you, you know, don't cry. And then the baby, little one is going to start crying and things. And so they maybe start to look to other adults of, how am I supposed to react in this situation? Like if there's a strange dog, you know, does mom say, oh, nice doggy, pet the doggy, it's okay, come here? Or does the mom say, step away from the dog and come back here and don't touch the dog? So they look for some clues from other adults. Should I be scared of that dog? And 2-year-olds are starting to develop their pretend skills, and 3-year-olds know that people have thoughts and beliefs, but like in those research studies, they may not realize that they're different thoughts and beliefs from what they have. Like if dad calls on the phone, and, you know, just regular phone, not video, and says, you know, where's mom? And the 3-year-old just points, you know, but dad can't see, but they can see, so it's good enough. And then preschoolers, like the story Little Red Riding Hood, and the reader knows that it's a big bad wolf, but Little Red Riding Hood just doesn't get it. You know, Grandma, what big teeth you have. And I thought about that because of the age that we're telling the kids the story. But what's happening in that story, that little one is not reading the book themselves. There's an adult intervening in there and pointing out that information and explaining the situation of what they know, but why Little Red Riding Hood thinks something else. What does she think? What's going to happen? And they hear that story over and over, but it's done with explanation. And 4-year-olds start to realize maybe people are thinking other things, and preteens are able to kind of expand that to other eras or other cultures. Like, in a different era, they used leeches for bleeding people. And today, not so much. That we have kind of a different view in the US here of how to treat some medical conditions, and leeching is not popular anymore. But they're able to then start to work on compare and contrast for different cultures, different time frames, that people might see or do things differently, and they think that that's the right thing to do. And adolescents are developing their theory of mind, but they still have issues with wanting to fit in and what are other people thinking about me. And they think they know what other people are thinking about them, but that may not be what other people are thinking about them, so their thinking's in a little bit of a different way. And so that's maybe an aspect of theory of mind. And adults start to use sarcasm and satire. They can infer other people's emotions from their body language or the tone of voice that they said something. And the tone of voice may not be accessible to learners who are deaf or hard of hearing. But adults, you might still see, have a little difficulty with a dry sense of humor, some people, or perhaps they can't understand opposing political views. That maybe you don't want to get into a discussion with that person about a different political view or religion because it is so diverse from your own, and the other person's thinking is not expandable, perhaps. So theory of mind can still play into adults. I know we play this game, I think it's like Apples to Apples. Did you ever play that, where you have to have like a definition of something, and they and sometimes your cards just don't fit with what matches it, and you put down anything. And we played this, and one family member, just an adult, said, well, I just don't understand this game. I don't know why, so-and-so picked that card. And it's just because he's got a sense of humor. He's always had a sense of humor, and even though somebody else put out the perfect definition, he likes the funny one, and so if you're playing that game, you have to know when it's his turn, you got to have something that's a little quirky and fun, because that's what he's going to pick, where she just didn't understand that. And, she didn't say it wasn't fair, but she didn't want to play. And kids might misread other people's intentions or motivations, and this is not like a parenting flaw or a moral flaw. It is just something that studies have shown that kids can have a lag in their theory of mind development if they have a hearing loss. And the good news is teachers can help, interpreters can help, parents can help, support staff can help kids make progress. Kids who have intellectual disabilities, brain injury, they're going to have challenges with theory of mind. And depending on the degree of any of these disabilities, autism spectrum disorder, that could be an additional layer of challenges if our students have an additional disability as well. For kids, just exposure to incidental learning, that they don't have that, like the slipping on the ice, that there's not somebody explaining in the moment that situation to them, giving an explicit explanation, they're going to miss out on things that maybe the other kids are overhearing of what's being said to the lady on the ice. And they may try to, figure it out from what they see. Like one boy, he had autism spectrum disorder and was deaf, and he, was running around on the playground hitting people. And after some observations, they came to realize, well, he was playing tag, but he didn't get it that everybody wasn't up for grabs to be tagged. And so they ended up trying to give him more information, and they put on a red shirt, if they were the person to be tagged. So that gave him some more insights into the rules, but he needed explicit information and just didn't pick it up from overhearing. And I said I wanted to add something for vision loss, and there was like a review of some studies that was done called Development of Theory of Mind Consideration for Children with Visual Impairments, and that was by Eli Medin, Kaplansky, Hedda Ostrowski, and that was published in the Journal of Blindness and Innovative Research. And they summarized some different things, but that they looked at the studies from a while ago and the studies now, where they, those activities that I all shared with you, well, they looked at, are they accessible for kids who have a vision loss? Like a story where a boy goes to bed, and then when mom leaves, he hides under the bed, and mom comes back, and where's mom going to look? But going to bed and having mom come in may be something that a child with vision loss has had happen to them. So it wasn't something that they had to see to really understand. And they found that, there was an improvement when they had changed some of those examples, and that there was another study that kids that had optic neural pathway vision problems, they showed delays rather than kids that had vision problems in non-retinal areas. And kids with vision loss aren't necessarily going to pick up on the visual cues that they might receive from the other people that are reacting. But studies had showed that actually the moms of kids with vision delays give more explanations. And so that helps them to develop theory of mind, and teachers need to do that within the school environment too. I think the studies showed that children with hearing loss of hearing parents did not get that level of explanation. There was also research done that showed that kids with cochlear implants also still had delays in theory of mind in the areas of wants and beliefs. And what are other things we can do? I'll say it, interpret, but also explain, depending on your student's situation. But we need to interpret and explain everything. That there was studies showed that from Muller and Schick saying that if their child's language is simplified, they're going to get less exposure to other people's mental states. If we're not interpreting that or saying that to kids, then the quality of their information is reduced, and that's going to impact them. And if you think about if you had a child with hearing loss, and we're usually recommending that they have seating preferentially up in the front or near the speaker, the person that's talking, and if they just have a teacher or they have an interpreter, that, what do we tell them? That they're supposed to watch. They're supposed to have their eyes up here and be watching. But what if the teacher says there's going to be a test, and that child with perfect behavior is just watching forward, like we've asked them to always do. But the rest of the class is like grumbling is happening. And they're saying it's not fair. We don't understand. Nobody gets this. We shouldn't have a test yet. And the child in the front, who's deaf or hard of hearing, is feeling those same things. But if the teacher is not explaining what's going on in the background, or the interpreter is not interpreting the culture of the classroom, what else is going on in the classroom besides that teacher, to give insights into the other people's states of mind, that deaf child is going to feel like they're all alone in feeling this way. And then, of course, the teacher might take on an angry expression. And so now the student sees that the teacher tells them that there's a test, and she's mad about it. And so that doesn't make sense. So we need to be sure to interpret the culture of the classroom, and to use the words about mental state thinking, believing, knowing, opinion, confused. And I'll tell you a little example here that Brenda Schick had shared in Cognition in the Classroom, Academic and Social Implications, an interview with Brenda Schick by Leanne Seaver. And I'll kind of summarize this. They were looking at interpreter skills. And in these examples, the teacher was talking about civil rights issues and slavery. And she was talking about lynching of Black people in the South. And one of the students asked, "Did that really happen?" And the teacher said, "Yes, that happened." And the teacher had that tone of voice to let the students know that they thought the teacher thought that was an atrocity and wrong behavior. But what Schick found was sometimes the interpreter just skipped that question from the student. Or if they answered it or conveyed it, then they said it in like a matter-of-fact way. So that the other students in the classroom heard the atrocity of this, the emotion and the intent behind the teacher's meaning. But the deaf child got just a matter-of-fact answer, yes, that happened. And so that's something we need to be mindful of if our students are in an interpreted educational setting. Are they having access to the emotions and the intent and the mindset of the teacher? That what is she trying to do in this lesson? What emotions and feelings is that teacher trying to evoke, and are we doing it? And sometimes, I've actually had someone, say, well, I really didn't want to, that's such a hard subject. I didn't want to talk about that. It's like, of course you have to talk about that. And you have to talk about the Holocaust and other things, but you have to share that information with the intent that the teacher is revealing. Does that kind of make sense? Because if our kids don't get that, if they're not getting the register shifts, the formality of the language, or informal kind of language that is not translating that. When they go to the principal's office, the explanation about how the window broke perhaps needs to be more formal than when they tell their friends. And the language of how that's conveyed is important for that information. And does the interpreter convey like who's talking and the intonation, the mood, because the kids aren't hearing the tone of voice of what that teacher is saying. And this sounds complex, but I really like this. This is not hard. It's Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And so now you're thinking, oh, well, that's like really exciting. Tell me more about that, Linda. But really, what it just is if you think about the student, the kid, and there's like this zone around them from where they are and what they know and their potential for what they can be. And that zone, if you get a caring adult in that zone to help mediate or explain a little bit, to get them from here to where they need to be. If you have someone that could come in and mediate or explain, that is going to help the child grow in that moment, and then you can talk about other times that might apply. And so we'll just do another 2-3 minute table talk there, like we did right at the beginning. And if you can think about a time that somebody stepped into your zone of proximal development, that they helped give you some information. They didn't tell you what to do necessarily, but they gave you some more information about maybe what happened in the past or what could happen if you think about this in the future, that somebody came into your zone and gave you information at a difficult time where you wanted somebody's opinion and support. Maybe just if you can think of an example or two in your little group of how that helped you. Maybe you were a new teacher, maybe you had a problem with something, and let's do a little tabletop share for just a couple of minutes. Okay. Okay, I'm going to bring us back. It sounds like from what I hear that I'm going to infer that you've had somebody help you. Would someone like to share like an example where that was something that was important to you? Anybody willing to share that example? Or not? Okay. Kay. Okay. Okay, all right. And I think that's the idea of true mediating, that you're helping the poor person move forward because you want them to be successful.
Could you please repeat what you said?
Oh, I'm sorry, that, that she always helps her and she never feels stupid in the extra information that she's needing to receive, and she appreciates that she's just helping her move forward down the line. And a lot of times we do have special colleagues or other trusted adults that we could go to for some feedback about a situation. Perhaps when I was coordinating, people would come to me and ask, what should I do in this situation? And I could say, well, this is what's happened before, or this could be an unintended consequence if you choose this response. And these things, we may also want to think about what happens with kids with a vision loss. They may have access to tone of voice, but they may not have access to the facial expression that the teacher gave in reaction to what the students were doing. So they hear the word about the test, but they don't perhaps know that the teacher is responding negatively to the little background chatter that's going on. And so kids with vision loss need extra explanation of what's going on because they get the tone, but they don't see if the facial expression matches that. If it's, if it was said, oh, I'm really upset about that, but they're not. And to deliver that information to our learners with vision loss so that they get the full intention and motivation behind the speaker there. And so from those earlier studies, what they came out with were some things that were really needed for kids to develop theory of mind, for kids with hearing loss, that you have to have discussions about mind thoughts, about beliefs, intentions, motivations, things like that. And you need to have perspective-taking discussions in the moment that it's happening, but also leading up to it, so it's not a stressful discussion when you're talking about people having differences. And we need to include, even in interpreted situations, that clause, thought that, feels that, thinks that. And vocabulary. The kids need to have the general vocabulary that happens from discussion and reading, and also specific vocabulary related to those feeling and thinking words, so that when we say it or sign it, they know what it is. Have they seen it fingerspelled? Have they had that explained? And even with very little kids, you can give them the concept of frustrated, that they don't always have to be angry or mad or upset, that sometimes they're just frustrated. And how do we see that? And this was from that Language and Theory of Mind study. Things that can help are like pretend play, we talked a little bit about, and discussing preferences, likes and dislikes, that they may not be good or bad. And some kids might not get this. So an activity you might do is, maybe we'll just do a little quickie version of this now. Okay. Yeah, you just have to tell me your likes or dislikes. Those that like salty better than sweet, stand up. Salty better than sweet. Okay. People that like both salty and sweet, stand up. Okay, sit down. How about carrots or beans? People that like carrots, stand up. Okay, I'm a carrot, I'm standing. Okay. How about spicy or mild? Do you like mild? I'm going to stand for mild. Okay, sit down. How about if you like really spicy? Hot and spicy. Where you sweat. Hot and spicy sweat. Okay, all righty, sit down. And do you like driving or being the passenger? Who likes to drive? Okay. How about who likes kids? Kids? Kids. Okay, most of you do. So that might be some simple way where it doesn't really matter, but like we've talked about before, some people want you to like what they like. And my friends know that I cannot, I can't tolerate really spicy. And so, after their try it, and then they saw what happened, they now test the stuff for me so that I don't accidentally get something spicy, because they know what happens. But we can talk about that with kids. We could say, you know, your preference is for blue, and so I'm going to give you the blue one today. And things like that, where we can incorporate that, or ask the kids to incorporate choices that they ask for other people, as a way to give them broadening their mind for different solutions and accepting what other people think or say. And so for kids, you might do something also like, you know, broccoli and, you know, carrots, or Brussels sprouts. These were just all things I had in the refrigerator. I don't like Brussels sprouts, but my husband Elliot does. So you can do this, or you can ask them or your colleague which one they might pick. Like, turn to the person next to you and say which one that they might like or dislike. Just pick one and look at that person next to you and decide which one they might not like.
Am I supposed to tell them?
Tell them, yeah, just tell them, and then you can say whether they're right or wrong. Okay. Did you guess right? You're still guessing. So you can kind of do this example with kids like this, or you could do something like, you know, walk in my shoes, or see things from my point of view with glasses. You can show different ways, like the thought bubbles that were done in the different different research, to show what might be happening. Helping with problem solve, if you model out loud problem solving, like, okay, today I was going to bring my lunch. I wanted a sandwich, and I didn't have any bread, but I had a hot dog bun, so I brought my sandwich on a hot dog bun. And you give them a different way to kind of expand their thinking and use it towards problem solving, that perhaps that they could think of a different solution than an aggressive one. Thinking about things for somebody else's point of view, like if you're buying a present. If I'm buying a present for my husband, I think he likes golf, and so maybe I'd think of a golf shirt or something related to golf that he might like. But my mom would just think, well, Linda will like what she likes, and so you should see what I get. You know, and I've gotten gifts like that, you know, for a shower gift, that obviously this lady liked the dragons riding each other around on the plate, but that wasn't my style. But I had to think, she must really like this style. So this was important for her, because she picked that out for me as a present. But kids may not always think about that, and that's why sometimes having somebody get into that zone of development, we could help think out loud what wasn't said, what was unspoken, or what the other person might be thinking about. And pointing out different physical situations or environmental clues. Like, did you ever watch those shows where they're doing remodeling, or they switched houses, or whatever it is, and then maybe the homeowners don't see it, and they walk in for the big reveal, the husband and wife, and then the wife starts to cry. And then we think about the theory of mind of the husband. Does he say, I hate it too? Or does he wait and say, are those happy tears? What do you think? So that he doesn't get himself in trouble because maybe he just wanted to agree with his wife, but the tears that he saw represented a different emotion. And sometimes that happens with our kids too, and we have to explain that we have to think that they may not respond the way, that they may not be feeling the way that we see them respond. They did so, I'll just move on here. You may want to talk about prejudiced or stereotyping people, being able to understand about people have different thoughts and beliefs than we do, but it's okay. It's like that red and blue example you could go back to, that people think about things differently, and that's okay. And maybe we have more in common with people that think differently than we do, or practice a different religion than we do, and we actually have more in common with them, but there are some differences that we respect. Kids may also not even know when to say thank you or respond back hi, and sometimes they may not hear it. You know, sometimes we may be walking along and someone says hi to me and I don't hear it, and my husband will say, oh, so-and-so is saying hello, you know, and then I'll turn right away, but we might think that that's rude behavior, that that's ignoring, or maybe they just don't know how the other person is thinking, feeling, that we need to respond to that, or recognize when to say thank you, or how to acknowledge when somebody else wins and we didn't. What are some things, what can we script for them to know what to say? You can think about this from directions. I was in a school, actually a couple schools, where the building had like some round things, you know, and when round things are where the rooms were. And if there was a new person in the building, you know, I would have to say, well, the classroom's here, but if you miss it, just keep going around again and you'll get to it, because you have to take the perspective of the person that's new for the building, or it's 2 floors with the round on the bottom and stairways at either end, and just caution them to try to remember which stairway they came down so they end up in the right part of the building. So giving directions is an important part of theory of mind, because you're thinking about what the other person knows or thinks about. Like, I remember playing a game with my aunt and in-laws and my mom, and they wanted us to play this game that they love, but they weren't so good about telling us the rules. And so we just sort of started, and it was like, I don't really get this. I love to play games, but I don't know what the object of this is. And so you just tried to play along, but the theory of mind thing was kind of overtaken by their excitement to play the game. And this happens in social situations. This is part of the social emotional learning standards, to recognize feelings of others and be able to state the perspective of other people. And I'm going to share with you a quick example that I'd like you to do in some tabletop talking here, when we were thinking about theory of mind and language development. And because you have, you know, I just think teachers and staff that work with kids who are deaf and hard of hearing kind of have this focus about their language development. But I'm going to show you in a unique way how we maybe have to think about this a little bit more. And I have some examples that I'd like you to talk about. One, how could you convey a different tone of voice? And the other is, are you really, you think you are, but are you really conveying what that other person's state of mind or feeling is? So the first one is John thought dinner is at 9. And in the little, we'll do this as a little group activity, but to think about what's the speaker's intent if you just changed the tone of voice or the word that you highlight. And the examples here are John thought dinner is at 9. John thought dinner is at 9. Different ways that you might say it and see how you might explain or how you might decide John thought dinner is at 9. So different words on the same sentence, if it is just interpreted or said and explained, is maybe not the intent and message. So I'm going to pass this out. If I could have a little helper here to pass with me. Probably like share, so like 1 every 2 or 3 people. Yeah. Everybody got enough so you can discuss?
I would do it with an eye roll.
So what did you find? Did it make a difference how your tone of voice was? Were you able to actually convey that? How did you do that? How did you convey the intention of the speaker? What did you do?
Different facial expressions,
Okay, facial expressions can help.
intonation, what you emphasize.
Which,
how you say it.
right.
An explanation sentence after the fact.
Oh, an additional sentence to help explain it. Because you're talking about John's thoughts, and you need to give more information because it may not be what we're thinking. Anybody else?
For just signing.
For signing, what did?
It's harder to do when you're
It's
just
harder
signing
to
it.
do with
You
signing.
can emphasize if you're saying it, but when you're trying to sign it, it's
Right, so that you may have to
looking at it and it's the same.
switch the words, that you're emphasizing something else up front in those sentences. What John is thinking about, that's important, or you're also adding, even if it's in sign, you're also signing some extra explanation. Whoops, I didn't walk into that. That was good. Some extra things, but it's maybe some things that we don't think about when we're saying what or repeating what someone else said, that we have to have that in there. So I have one more for you to try. And what this is to think about how you might interpret or explain or say different feelings like boring. That's a very popular word. With kids, sometimes boring means, to me, it's too hard. But boring versus bored. So think about that. I'm going to pass some more out to your groups, and then in the end, I'll collect these back again. Maybe if I could just pass these to you guys. There we go. I might need another helper. Could get a volunteer. Thank you. If you could do that sign. Thank you. Appreciate it. I don't remember how many groups I had, so just raise your hand if you need one. Okay, yes, thanks. Here, I'll take some going the other way. All right. If they're coming around here, if you could share and then hand them back with me. You might think about how you might sign it or say it so that the meaning's understood. Okay, what did you think about this? Did you find that there really was a difference between bored and boring? And it's whose feeling is it? Who is bored and who is boring? And so if we're interpreting this message or we are explaining those feelings, it's important to convey the difference between confusing and confused. And anything anybody found out that they'd like to share, or what how they decided they would explain or interpret it?
Okay, so the first one, John is bored, I'd be like, look, he's bored, like maybe show his body. And then the second one, I would say, John, he's not fun. Like, so I would always add and explain.
Add extra explanations.
I think for the first one, John is bored, you could use the word feels. So John feels bored, feels bored, and then John is boring, like pointing to John, boring, using facial expression. But if you use the word feels, it conveys that feeling, I think, of his state.
Yeah, I was saying for the ones that say John is boring or John is confused, like, you could add that himself.
That's how he feels, and how it makes me feel, would also be important to emphasize the feeling that I have about thinking about John. How am I feeling? He makes me feel this way. Those kinds of things that you might add in an extra explanation, and our interpreters know about these kinds of situations for confused, confusing, interested, interesting, whatever the verb combination is. If it's a passive voice kind of sentence, it needs to be interpreted or conveyed in a different way. So, yeah.
Also, just like if you're looking at a picture or looking at a person, I think somebody kind of glossed over it a little bit, but like explaining why, like, oh, their eyes are looking down, or oh, their chin is up, or they're smiling, or they're like talking about what specific facial features
Right.
cue you in on some of these.
Yes, that's a
feelings.
good point, to offer some clues and cues of how you know that. Why you want to help somebody. I can see their face looks this way, or I can see that they look bored.
Maybe like for boring, if you explain that too, I'm making it up. John is talking, saying, makes me feel bored, John's bored, So explaining what is boring, like what does that really mean when you say something is boring? Because sometimes I think kids can overuse words if they don't have other words. It's boring if they don't have another way to explain.
Right. And to me, I feel bored, because of what he's doing. So it's like, who's having, he's boring, but it's more really about how I'm feeling about the situation, not how he's feeling. He may not feel bored.
Picking his favorite video game and not bored, but I'm like so bored with you picking your
Right.
favorite video
So
game.
being able to identify who's boring or bored in the situation just gives you a little insight into how language plays in when we're conveying the thoughts and feelings of other people, or how other people's behaviors and thoughts and feelings influence us. That was another point that we made. I'm going to share with you, I had said that at the end I would give you a little bit more information about the link to literature. And we need, when we're talking about books or stories at any grade level, all through the grades, to be looking at emotions, likes and differences, give background information, and adjust facial expressions when we're telling the story. But maybe we might talk about how we feel about a story that's being discussed, or how another character might feel about the story. Do you know the story, the true story of the Three Little Pigs? it's told from the perspective of the wolf. That was really, I mean, I think he just sneezed once and something happened to a house, and, he was just really coming to get a cup of sugar or something, but it's like a comparison, and that's part of some literature reading like that may happen to introduce to kids different perspectives to things. So you can do this through stories. There's a website, I don't know if you know this, one word, betterlessons.com, and it's referenced in the back. In your handout in the back, there's lots of resources and references if you want more information. But it is a website where they took all of the Common Core standards and they asked master teachers they had selected, I think this was maybe an NEA project, I have to go back and look, but they selected teachers, master teachers, to submit one lesson every day. And it might be, their lesson might be in reading or in math, and they linked it to the Common Core. And so from the standards, there are perspective taking or point of view kinds of lessons. In elementary, they might call it point of view, perspective for middle school, junior high, and high school. And they take that even all the way up to some person that was teaching about of mice and men, but her introductory anticipatory set was a perspective-taking lesson. And so I would say just go on that site. They've expanded it to other things, but it's interesting. You can find information. And so I looked, and one of them had used the true story of the 3 little pigs, or the 3 little wolves, and the big bad pig was something else. And we all bring our own perspectives into the situation, but we need to share that with children as they read. And so I took a look at the different reading Common Core standards and what they might be in relationship to theory of mind. If you were working on kids, the expectation is that they're applying these theory of mind skills to what they're reading. So sometimes reading is an area of challenge for our kids, and if they don't yet have the theory of mind stuff, it's going to be harder when they have to take the point of view of different characters, or what is the author's point of view, what are they trying to convey to us. Also, speaking and listening is another standard that can apply to theory of mind as well. So I had mentioned that before. You can use shoes to walk in somebody else's shoes. You could wear different glasses or hold up a different character's face to give their thoughts and point of view. Then they have something here linked for all the different grade levels. You'd be able to find something. One of them, I think it was a 3rd grade example, was point of view practice, and they just used a cartoon video where you didn't have to have access to sound, and you could tell still from the expressions on the face of the character what their reaction was, what their point of view might be. There might be a story about country living versus city living, and which way is the author trying to persuade you. So I've listed for you the different, if you needed to make that link, one of these will probably work for you if you were working on this perspective taking and theory of mind. I had mentioned about betterlesson.com, and one of the teachers that I had worked with, Andrea Pratt, was one of the teachers selected. Her 2nd grade reading classroom was kids were deaf and hard of hearing, and it was a total communication classroom. She submitted her lessons daily, and one of the things she had worked on was perspective taking. And she has allowed me to show portions of her PowerPoint, but this is an example. What do you like, cold snow or hot sun? What would you like, cold snow or hot sun, from the perspective of a snowman? What's the snowman going to like? How about would a dragon, and this started to relate to the book, like to live in a cave or a house? When you can think of other examples, if you're a teenager, would you like scary movies or a cartoon? And what if you're a little kid? Which one would you like? What would you like? What would your mom or dad pick? The news or something else? And then I looked at this. This was something that was, I think, like a 10th grade example from another person that had posted on betterlessons.com, and she was trying to develop the kids' skills in an argument to talk about a book. It might have been the Mice and Men book, and you could do it Andrea's way, where which would you rather eat, the spider or the frog? She had done Stanton had done making an argument for eating bugs. It's good for the environment. It might be a delicacy in other countries. It's a source of protein, high nutrition, whatever it might be. Can you make an argument? And an argument's like, not like mean argument, it's like literature argument, where you're able to support your thoughts. And she took this as an introduction before they had to do more writing. So you actually can carry this up through high school for the kids. And I have just one quick closing activity that I'm going to do with you now that you've got great theory of mind for thinking about what people might be saying or thinking. I'm going to give you like a picture to think about. What do you think? And you could do a little tabletop activity. What's the theory of mind in this picture? Okay. There we go. Oops. We can do a little tabletop talk of what you think either one or more of the characters might be thinking in that picture. Whoops. Oops, here you go. Where I drop all my stuff. Oops, sorry. I lost, here's, you got one?
Thank you.
There you go. So take a look and see what you might caption for this picture, either for the group or a particular character. It's a fashion statement. Okay, so it can be funny or not funny. Anybody want to share what they caption their picture as? How about, we'll just start here. What did you caption your picture? You have the one with the clothing choice of the toddler.
Yeah,
My caption was careful where you step.
Careful where you step. And this picture is actually taken in China, and the baby's bottom is exposed. I don't know, maybe that's like for quick diapering activities, I don't know. But the baby seemed happy. Anybody else would you like to share what you were thinking?
Well, it's a baby with an alligator. I'm assuming it's not real, but I guess if it's from the baby's perspective, it's just like peekaboo.
Okay, that the baby's standing next to an alligator, and good news, it's not a real alligator. This is a statue kind of thing, and the baby has kind of a funny face, and she's thinking peekaboo, not scared of the alligator. How about the next table? Do you guys?
We had this guy holding an ice cream and eating an ice cream, and we assumed that he was eating his wife's while she was gone and holding his to eat for later. So just wondering if she'll notice what happened.
Yeah, what I said, that's my husband Elliot, I said, hold this. And I took a picture of him holding 2 gelatos. So he was laughing, he thought that was kind of funny, because it looked like he was eating them both. But sharing other captions you put?
Well, we had the same one with the wardrobe choice. I thought, must be a hot day. Mom has a popsicle and he's, missing some clothing, so.
Yeah.
We also had the ice cream one, but we went to the other end of we definitely assumed wife was shopping. But we also thought, well, what if you couldn't pick just one flavor?
Oh, well,
you go,
that
too.
works too. We were in Italy and had gone to a gelato place. That's what really happened. And I did eat my ice cream. Okay. Anybody else want to share from this table of the
baby.
the baby?
Yeah, the baby.
The baby with the bare butt.
It could just be their, a method of potty training.
Maybe. That's a little quicker that way. Not so much to remove the baby's bottom is kind of exposed in a little peekaboo way. You guys, you had this picture. What are they thinking?
We had a number of thoughts, like,
Okay.
why am I here? When do we leave?
Okay.
How much longer?
Why am I here? When do I leave? How much longer? It was the lineup of, it looks like cadets, and the last guy in line is yawning, and he seems kind of bored. Anybody else have that picture? Okay. What? The soldier's picture, that was in the Kremlin. That's where I took that picture. So it gives you just a little more to think about there. Okay, you guys, you got the baby bottom. There's a lot of those. Any thoughts you had? New thoughts? Nope, same
potty
what
training
everybody,
is like the-
what everybody was thinking. Okay, you guys had the ice cream. Ice cream, thoughts with the ice cream?
You had a good perspective that it's hashtag grandpa problems.
That it was what?
Hashtag grandpa problems.
Oh, grandpa problems, holding it for kids, yeah, grandkids, yes. Us and, you've got the ice cream one. Any new thoughts with that?
Very much the same.
The same kinds of things, that's okay. Anybody else have different thoughts than we have shared? Oh, you got the baby inside the alligator.
The way that she's making the face, we were like, shh, he's telling me a secret. We really think she's kind of like trying to listen to what he's saying.
And then we said, oh, snap.
Anybody have a different picture or a different comment? You have the baby in the alligator. What did you guys think?
We had the same comments as them.
The same comments, that maybe she didn't know it wasn't, maybe she didn't know that it was an alligator, but I kind of had the look like she's looking at Mom, is this okay? You know, is this a good idea? So even though we might look at a situation and try to think of, the thoughts and feelings of somebody else, we might have a little bit of a different interpretation, and you know, that's okay. So I'd like you to think about, as we're about to break for lunch, what you might do to help develop theory of mind with the students that you work with, and hope that you enjoyed the presentation today and you have a wonderful lunch, and thank you very much for your time and attention.